7 o'clock on a Thursday night, we begin with Your Voice, Your Vote. And former Governor Nikki Haley, in a campaign town hall in New Hampshire last night, the Republican presidential candidate was questioned by a voter on what caused the Civil War. This was her response.
I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. I think it always comes down to the role of government and what the rights of the people are. And I will always stand by the fact that I think government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be all things to all people. Government doesn't need to tell you how to live your life. They don't need to tell you what you can and can't do. They don't need to be a part of your life. They need to make sure that you have freedom. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way.
And for reaction to all of this, we're going to bring in our State House insiders, Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist, Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist. Antoine, Nikki Haley tried to clean this up some today with a statement saying, of course, slavery was a part of the Civil War. Is she trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube tonight?
Too late, and bless her little heart. Here's the facts. Let's start with something that's non-debatable. It was about slavery. In fact, if you know the history of South Carolina, you know that the 1860 proclamation issued by the state of South Carolina, part of South Carolina's secession from the Union, first line talks about
slavery itself.
So we should start there. Secondarily, we know that the former governor have a history of somehow not dealing with the facts in a real way. It was a 2010 interview with the Patriots group, Patriot, some sort of Patriot Confederate group, where she indicated that the flag was about heritage, not hate. That issue is still woven in the fabric of who we are as South Carolinians. And minus 9 people being killed in a church in Charleston in the name of white supremacy, that flag never would have come off the Capitol grounds because she pledged that. And so, sadly, Haley and others are cuddling and playing footsie to this reality. That's why banning books and whitewashing history is something we should not do in this country, or we would not be having conversations like this.
JR, we've been talking about in the past that Nikki Haley has been trying to build momentum and she can get traction. It's going to be really interesting to see whether this is some speed bump that she's hit, some traffic jam, or if she has hit a brick wall. You can talk inside politics, and this is what we do here, this is about her being in New Hampshire, where their slogan is live free or die. And in a simplistic way, she's talking about freedom and completely missing the fact that a war started in our state had to do with keeping people in slavery. And it feels like one of those Howard Dean kind of moments that we talk about, where it's just like you had something going here and then what happened? Because if you don't understand that part of the entire history of this state and not recognizing the fact that, yes, this had to do about states' rights, but it was states' rights about keeping human beings in slavery, that's a problem that Nikki should have put right up front in that whole discussion.
And sometimes you just lose credibility with certain audiences when you try to go too far or get too cute in this case.
Yeah, it's cute by half.
And the fact of the matter is, the people's hearts and minds she is organically trying to change, they will never be changed because the cake is already baked. So instead of making some acknowledgments and talk about how we pivot going forward, she steps in and take not only this country backwards, but she takes her candidacy, I believe, 3 steps backwards.
It was a tough day for her in any momentum that she could have been having, because this was a late night statement that came out at a rally last night. And for the reporters who woke up to it this morning, it's like, oh, wow, we've got to really now deal with the story of the day. And that is a lack of recognition that the civil rights or the Civil War was based on states allowing slavery.
All right, let's move on to the Democratic primary now. Antoine, can you tell me whether or not the president or the vice president is going to be visiting South Carolina between now and February 3rd?
Look, I expect to see the president. I expect to see the vice president. I expect to see the second gentleman. I expect to see the first lady. I expect to see Lottie Dottie and everybody coming to the South Carolina Democratic Party. Look, it's so exciting for South Carolina to be first in the nation. I think it says a lot about the fact that because South Carolina is a place where more than 40% of enslaved Africans who came to this country came through Charleston, South Carolina. It says a lot that 60% of the people who cast their vote in the Democratic primary in this state will be African American, and those voices will be heard first. And so it's game on. And on the Republican side, the same thing. However South Carolina shakes up will ultimately decide who the nominees will be.
Right.
But we do know that the vice president is going to be in Myrtle Beach, I believe, in about a week or so, right?
I think the vice president has some upcoming travel to South Carolina that I think will probably be announced sooner or later, and I do believe in my heart that she will spend significant time in South Carolina along with other high-level Democratic principals.
It's going to be really important, I think, to put any other name that could possibly float up there to give any level of credence to them for the president, the vice president, and the entire Democratic team to get to South Carolina, because we pick presidents in this state.
Right.
We have a history of that, and that's why, the discussions that we have about politics in this state are so important.
And some late-breaking national news this afternoon on the political front. Former President Donald Trump added back to the Colorado ballot. This was going to be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, but the Colorado Secretary of State stepping in late today saying, nope, the former president's going to be on that ballot. Dave, your reaction?
I think it's an important step that needed to be made. I think this is a place where any continuation of a question about whether or not the ballot is secure, the ballot is right, whether an election is stolen or not stolen, needs to get off the table so that we can actually start talking about the policies and the issues that matter and stop playing the game of publicity politics. It's not working right now for the country as a whole.
Look, I think it was good to put the former president back on the ballot. Let the people decide, and when the people decide, let's also, the former president and his allies, say that the election has been decided and there's no debate about whether the election was stolen or not. And so if step one is the Secretary of State stepping in, let step two be Republicans knowing that when the people decide, let's let that be concrete, that that is the will of the people.
All right, and finally, state lawmakers, they come back to Columbia in a couple of weeks. Is it going to be a busy session?
It's going to be a mixed session. I've talked to some Senate leadership, and they're all up for re-election this year. Fourth quarter in a 4-year term is typically a slow time for anything to happen. Speaker of the House, Merle Smith, has said it's going to be about economic development and workforce development in this state. That's his key priorities. I think a lot of the rest of the members are sitting there going, do I keep opposition out of the way so that I can get reelected, or how do I make as little waves as possible?
Look for most of the real work to happen after March, and that's when filing closes for both sets of parties' primaries. And then that window between March and the end of the session, look for things to be more political in nature than they are in previous years. And so the only thing I would probably depend on coming out of this session will be a budget of some kind.
Absolutely. And then you're going to see a lot of movement on the Republican side with people on the further right than the majority of the members that are in the South Carolina House and Senate, trying to make that push further right in state politics.
All right, Dave, Antoine, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thanks, you too.
All right.
You
And
too,
of course,
my
for all things politics at any time, go to our website, WLTX.com. And we do have one other political note, though. The state Republican Party Chair Drew McKissick officially certifying the 7 candidates on the presidential primary ballot today. The candidates include the former Governor Nikki Haley and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former President Trump. The South Carolina Republican presidential primary taking place Saturday, February 24th.